Welcome to the Lightning 50 e-commerce growth hacking podcast. Want to turn your business into a cash-generating machine? You've come to the right place. This bite-sized podcast reveals the technology secrets fueling the world's fastest-growing online brands. And for our host, we have retail industry expert Caroline Baldwin. She'll be sharing her own wisdom and experience as she interviews high-growth e-commerce brands to uncover their secret tech tools and tips for success. Let's get started on supercharging your growth. Here's Caroline.
Hello and welcome to this special edition of the Lightning 50 e-commerce growth hacking podcast. I'm Caroline Baldwin. I'm a business journalist who is delighted to have you join myself and my special guest for this extended episode to talk about women in business and the growth of fashion and e-commerce brands. With me today, I have Samanah Duran, who is a British fashion designer and an entrepreneur based mainly in London, UK. Samanah, it's so lovely to have you on the podcast today. How are you doing?
I am absolutely amazing. We just suffered some technical difficulties there, so we are back on track.
It's always joyful to be dealing with technical difficulties when you're on a podcast talking about technology, but you know, that's what happens, and I know all our audience understands everything out there. It's you just got to grit your teeth and have a giggle, really, but we've had a bit of that already, so hopefully we can take some of that energy into this conversation. So Samanah, you founded the fashion brand Critics Clothing and a digital media company called Be Your Own, and you were also named the Forbes 30 under 30 most influential in retail and e-commerce list a few years back, which is such an accolade. And tell our listeners our story. I read somewhere that you left home at 15 and then a handful of years later you've launched 2 businesses, all before you turned 30. How did you get to where you are now?
Yes, thank you so much. Yes, I mean, I don't know how much longer I can get away with using the Forbes 30 under 30 because I'm kind of, almost turning 33. But it's always good if I can, keep getting a spin on it, which is brilliant. Thank you. Great to be reminded of my youth. But yes, I mean, absolutely, you are correct in saying I left home relatively young. And I think it was more so just because I just wanted big things for myself. I didn't want to be a big fish in a small pond, and I had these big visions and these big hopes and dreams to go off to London and be a successful TV presenter, which in turn, I suppose, it did. And I really loved what I was doing for a while. But I often felt like it was a bit of a catch-22 situation, that you kind of needed the experience to get the gig, but then to get the gig, you needed the experience. And it was great, like I said, but I as I say, I often felt that it was other people that would tell me I was great at presenting, not that I got the fulfillment out of it that I thought that I should have and that I would have. So I remember being sat, having travelled all over, Albania, Ireland, a lot of the US, and particularly the west of the US. And I was sat in the Grand Canyon with a group of friends of mine, and I thought, okay, what do I want to do with my life? Where do I see myself going? Because I knew that it wasn't something that set my soul on fire. It didn't make me feel rewarded as such. And I knew that it wasn't going to be like a career option that I thought had much longevity in it. So I knew I liked the idea of building communities and building brands, and I liked the idea of starting like a clothing brand. As I said, particularly one that, really resonated with people and people really felt proud to be part of. And a few of my friends at the time were launching lingerie brands and swimwear labels and, more feminine kind of clothing. And I thought, wow, that's really not me either, to be honest. And I wanted a bit more creative input and control on it, rather than, buying white, like blank label stuff and just adding my name to it and pushing it out. So I collated some inspiration whilst I was out on the west coast of America. And lo and behold, by the time I got back to the UK, I'd already rang in a few connections of mine, having come from the media world. I'd spoken to a few friends within the industries, whether it was, journalists or, up and coming singers and songwriters and models and presenters. And I just said, look, I'm launching this brand. I could really do with some help, like pushing it out. And at the time, like Instagram was very much on the rise. Obviously, influencer marketing was very much unheard of. So we kind of really relied heavily on Twitter and actually having like an old school website. And so, yeah, I'd spoken to a couple of friends of mine, and back then a few of them were working as commercial models whilst at Mango, Oxford Circus. I said, look, if you come down and model some of the clothing for us, I'll pay you in food, which is what we did in Camden. And we put a really great lookbook together, which I think it actually still is quite cool and retro today, to be honest. So a couple of my friends, as I mentioned, worked within the industry, and I'd been invited out to a launch, a really desirable night hotspot, Bond Street in London. And Rita Ora was going to be there, and Cara, Delevingne and Poppy and all of that kind of crowd, like The Weeknd. I thought, oh my goodness, this would be amazing. I'd gotten all my samples together, as I'd mentioned, and I'd pretty much ordered very, very low minimum orders quantity, because I just didn't have the financial input to be ordering 50,000 pieces of these T-shirts and leather jackets and hoodies and such. I thought, oh my goodness, this will be amazing. And my flatmate and very good friend at the time, when I lived in London in Kensington, was Albanian. I thought, oh, this would be amazing. Maybe she can actually hook up the connection for me. And so we kind of got into this party, and I managed to get my way into VIP. And I said, oh, is there any chance, you could kind of put my T-shirt on? And I was thrusting it in her face. And my good friend, as I mentioned, was spoke Kosovan and said, look, can you just help a girl out type thing? So she stuck this T-shirt on and had a few pictures. And as it was, the paparazzi were waiting outside of this particular nightclub, and they were, taking all these amazing pictures of her in this gorgeous silver skirt. And then the next thing you know, it was in Look magazine, it was in Closer magazine, it was in all these different magazines, and the brand just really took off. I actually, as I said, I was very much working with a very, very small budget. So influencer marketing definitely wasn't a thing. But before you know it, I was like, okay, well, how do we evolve? How do we get more people to see the vision of the brand, of what we're doing, and getting it on more people and circulating it out in the press? And so I'd made very good friends with the Made in Chelsea lot, some of the Premiership footballers, David Airwood, a couple of up-and-coming songstress and grime artists like Sneak Bow and Wretch 32. And I said, listen, right, if you want an interview, we've just put this blog together on Critics Clothing on the website. I said, look, you stick the clothing on, we'll take the pictures, we'll interview you, and then we'll sell them back to the press. And that's exactly what happened. So we do it at our local hotspot, Amuse Mayfair in London, and get them down and order them a couple of glasses of wine or whatever, and we get talking. And as I said, I just ended up selling these pictures in this interview back to the press. And before you know it, it was just really, really getting out there. And then fast forward a couple of years later, roughly around 2014, I was actually heading out to, I think it was Spain at the time, or it might have been Ibiza or something. And I bumped into my then investor, who I'd got talking to about my visions for the brand and how I wanted to see it, on ex-celebrities like Beyonce and Rihanna. And I wanted to open a little store in Camden. And it was like, okay, cool. Yeah, this sounds really, really good. And he was talking more like IPO and getting a, good business strategy and game plan together. And I was like, oh my goodness, this would be amazing. And he then came on as my investor, and he really took the brand to higher heights, to be honest. And before long, we'd had a great PR agency and communications agency we were working with, and we had a great team, and we flew out to New York and we did an amazing lookbook, and we was working with amazing models out in the States. And I said that the brand just really, really took off. But I think overall, even though he was a great mentor, and I learned some very, very valuable lessons in my early years of business, we had very, very different visions for the brand. And I really like the idea of keeping streetwear culture as streetwear culture. And the vibes were very much like word of mouth. So if someone was to see something, they'd be like, hey, where'd you get that t-shirt from? And I didn't really have a desire to go into Selfridges because I knew the profit margins were particularly small. I had no interest in going into, let's say, like Harrods or any of the boutiques. I was just very happy doing concessions and like pop-ups. And as I say, just getting my store in Camden. And it was amazing. I really love what I built and the community that I built around it. And off the back of that, I was then able to launch my second business, which is now the Be Your Own digital media company that you see today, which launched in 2016. And yeah, here we are today. So
that's absolutely fantastic story, Samanah. So tell me, what was one of the biggest challenges when you were owning and running your own fashion brand?
I would say probably one of the biggest challenges I was faced with was that maybe nothing to do with my gender, but it was probably more so that being quite young, I had this huge, big vision brand where I wanted to see it go. And like it was kind of quite tough getting people on board, like once I got my investor on, like people knew I was kind of really serious and here to stay, here for the long game. But it was quite tough in the beginning, but I plowed on through and I think with any challenges, it's you've got to find a way to overcome that adversity. And I think the challenges that I was often faced with and presented with then were very relevant. They seemed like a really big deal, but now, I mean, that would just be a walk in the park for me. And I look at any challenge, I take it head on and find a way to overcome the barrier, really.
So you must have seen so much change in the e-commerce fashion landscape over that time. ASOS was starting to explode back then as well. What was some of the most interesting changes that you noted? And I realize obviously you kind of left the e-commerce side behind now, but I guess some of those trends have kind of come into how we shop today. What did you see that was quite interesting?
Well, I mean, so when I actually launched the brand, I mean, there were a lot of streetwear labels that were really up and coming at that time. So we had like Nietzsche London, we had Trap Star London, Fresh Ego Kid. And obviously, as I said, you had the big boys and big players over in the States with Stussy and Supreme and Palace London. But I think what really, I would say, revolutionised fashion labels was probably like influencer marketing and omni-channel marketing. Those things weren't really around when I started. Like you had 140 characters to put a caption into a tweet, put your thoughts into a tweet. Yeah. And so, as I say, like Instagram was just on the brink of breaking through. And so I feel like when I look back then, asking Rita or asking a couple of my commercial models that were, really on the rise and are pretty big names now, walking on Paris Fashion Week in the runways in New York, I'd be like, can you just stick this t-shirt on for £1? And they would, It was very, very transparent. It was very authentic. It's because they actually really liked the brand. Yeah. Whereas I think like now it's, as I say, it's all about figures and data and, influencer marketing. And I think that the transparency is very, very much lost, and the consumer doesn't really know what they're buying into these days, and whether really is the face of it and being paid, or is because they genuinely believe in and like the brand that they're representing and they're wearing and what it stands for as a brand ethos.
So on the Lightning 50, we have a list of fastest growing brands and where we rank them, and 25 of the brands on the list were actually fashion brands. And so, it's such a competitive landscape now. And I just wondered what you thought it was about fashion brands that has driven such growth in the last few years.
I think that's quite interesting, that question. I don't know what is the real driving force behind it, but I feel like with fast fashion being very much, readily available and the mass production of it, I feel like that's probably what's helping to churn out so many. I don't want it to sound very patronizing or derogatory, and I love the fact that people are going out there and building and putting brands together and stuff. But I feel like things aren't really ethically sourced. And I don't think these brands are very much looking at their carbon footprint and the damage that they're doing environmentally. So I think we're obviously seeing a lot of them, but I'd also equally at that same take, I'd like to see a lot of them kind of be eradicated, to be honest.
So yeah, for those out there that are a fashion brand that are thinking of getting into such a competitive market, have you got any tips out there to really encourage their growth?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that they need to do their research, definitely. I think you really need to be like looking into the products that you're sourcing, like the companies or the factories that you're working with. And, if it's made in Great Britain, it really should be made in Great Britain.
Yeah.
And I think that they, as I say, like founders and small business owners should really look at the impact that they're making environmentally, because that is really important.
Yeah, definitely. And looking to the future of kind of shopping, both online and maybe even on the high street, in the fashion world, how do you think we're going to be shopping in the next kind of maybe 10 years' time?
That's interesting. I mean, obviously, with the evolution of AI and tech and, being digitally available all the time, omnichannel is, it's ever evolving. So, I mean, I don't really know about that, but I feel like it's just one of those things that, because it's all happening so fast paced, I think we'll only really look back in 10 years and go, oh my goodness, we've got from there to here,
Yeah, definitely.
If you see what I mean?
Yeah. Do you think we'll all be like shopping in the metaverse with headsets, or do you think that's definitely not on the radar?
I mean, yeah, that would be quite interesting. I mean, obviously people are doing it via apps, and people are, I actually spoke to one lady who developed this amazing app where, you can kind of step into this changing room and like the clothes are kind of put on you. Like, I don't know if it's like CGI or something, but it was just very, very interesting because I suppose what that does take away is that whole customer experience of actually going into a store and trying something on and seeing how you look in the mirror. And it'd be interesting whether people actually take to it. Because I suppose as well, like you think maybe even during COVID, during the pandemic, people didn't really want to get out too much, did they? They didn't want to be exposed to this virus. So I suppose, I mean, it's all very, very interesting stuff. But I mean, I couldn't be too sure and predict exactly what the trends are going to be because I'm not really in that space too much at the moment.
Well, no, exactly. And that brings me on right to my next question, where I was going to say, let's go and talk about Be Your Own. So this side of your business life now, I'd love to know where the inspiration comes from. I have down here that it's a company dedicated to inspiring and championing female entrepreneurs on a mission to lead. Tell me why you went from fashion to mentorship.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it just very much went hand in hand. And I think if I had that support network that I've got today, I certainly wouldn't have made the costly mistakes that I made in my very early years of business. And I think that supporting other women in business is paramount, investing in female-led and female-backed businesses, as we all know it, according to like Rose reports, which I'm sure you're very familiar with, it really would boost the economy overall. And like I said, I started out in my early years of business making a lot of costly mistakes, and I just think they would have been avoided if I'd have surrounded myself with amazing women, not just particularly in the retail space, but in HR, in law, in finance. If I'd have just had those well-seasoned industry leaders around me to help me, I think that was, I think, very much at the forefront of my mind while building that community. And you think in 2016, it was very much around that era of female empowerment and the girl boss movement that was pioneered by Sophia Amoruso in the US. So, and I mean, to be honest, I love to surround myself with like-minded, ambitious women in business. So it just, as I said, just went hand in hand. And I'm very much at the forefront of what we do. And I love having the very much like the hands-on approach that I do with our ladies of our membership club as well, because I genuinely love watching women thrive and flourish in business. And I think we need to have more women like that who've got that mindset, that mentality that by supporting other women and helping to pave the way for the next generation of female entrepreneurs is, it's important. I think it really is.
Definitely. So what do you think that are the biggest barriers to women starting their own businesses today then? What are some of your members saying to you?
I think the feedback is it's two things really. Firstly, I would say it's the lack of confidence in oneself. I feel like women, they put limits on their own capabilities and their ability to achieve to a high level. And they kind of don't value their self-worth. And I find it interesting because, like, when you look at guys and how ego-driven they are, you know, they have no qualms about asking for like a pay rise, you know, asking for what they're worth. Whereas, you know, the culture, and maybe it's something to do with like generational values and the mindset that women have. It's almost like they lack the confidence to really go out there and get what they want and get what they deserve and really be at the forefront, you know. So that's one of the first things that I often see, which is quite challenging, and it's also disappointing. But I think it's something that if it's in the core, it's almost, some of it's almost like I say, like generational values, learned behavior. Societal views and opinions. But then second, I would also say like lack of resources, which we all know hugely would be lack of financial support and resources. You know, as we know, women's ventures, female-led or co-founded businesses are not invested in nowhere near as much as you know, male-dominated industries or ventures that are set up by men, you know, and that's what I often think is sad, because I think that women have got, you know, they can put some real great initiatives out there, and that, you know, they've got real values and great leadership skills, and it's disappointing to see that they're just not taken a chance on as much, to be honest. So something that I would like to help pioneer the change of in a few years to come, maybe putting together a great portfolio for women's businesses to invest in, because as I said, that it would boost the economy. Female entrepreneurship, as we know, plays a huge part. You know, it's 50-50 gender, isn't it, really? You know, 50% now is women. So, you know, without women, there is no man. So.
And we're chatting now because we're approaching International Women's Day, hence why we're really focused on championing women and mentorship. But what I'd love to know from you is who's been your biggest supporter and helped you as you've gone along your journey? And are there any fantastic women out there that we should be championing and keeping and really helping them as they go along with their business journeys too?
Yeah, I mean, well, yes. Rightfully so, you pointed out International Women's Day is on the 8th of March. You know, it was really to celebrate cultural and political achievements of high achieving, you know, highly ambitious women out there. And I love that. I think it's amazing. Women should be celebrated every single day because there's so many fabulous women doing amazing things out there. And often they're actually unheard. And I think the whole Be Your Own movement and platform was really born out of wanting to showcase women's brilliance and give them a platform to shine. Because, you know, that is what I think is important. I would definitely say we've had some really amazing like resource partners come on board, whether it's CEO, CMO or CFO, to offer great thought leadership pieces and webinars and be part of the podcast series. And a few do stick out, you know, Peppy, they're, you know, great company, a wellness company. We work with them quite frequently on stuff, especially for International Women's Day. You know, we work with Henley Business School, JP Morgan and McKinsey & Co. And we often do talks at universities to help women, you know, get on that next step in their career. So anywhere where I think that the synergy aligns and also like matches my personal ethos to support women, I'm very much, as I say, at the forefront of pushing that for sure. Who do I think is, I want to say, most influential, or who I feel inspired by? I would definitely say, probably if I'm leaning towards a more political standpoint, I would say Margaret Thatcher. I think she's amazing, and what she did for Great Britain overall. Some harsh lessons to be learned, but I think she was an amazing leader, whichever way you want to look at it. And I really think she used her voice and her platform and really gave other women, particularly in politics, a platform to kind of make sure that their voices are heard, or at least have a seat pulled up at the table, you know?
Yeah, definitely. And Samanah, what's next on the cards for you? Talking about career journeys, what have you got planned next?
Oh, there's so many things that are happening. You know, we've got a podcast series that we're in our actual third series now, but we've actually gone on to doing a monthly podcast, which is in partnership with Winject Studios, a broadcast from the States. And we've had some amazing guests. Just a couple of weeks ago, I interviewed Shahwaz Mund, MBE. I mean, she's just absolutely incredible. I had Vivian on from Albright Group, Bird and Blend Tea, the founder Chrissy Smith. And as we continue to grow, expand and evolve, you know, I believe that we've got so much on the horizon. It's kind of hard to keep up, but it's all about just improving the resources and tools that we can provide for women out there in whatever capacity, you know, whether it's visual content or potentially doing some pop-ups or exhibitions, or, you know, just really probably even getting out on the streets and talking to women. We've actually got some amazing round the table discussions that are happening, and Angela Mickleton MBE is actually kicking off the first one in April, along with 17 other powerhouse women, you know, and those things I really look forward to. And I really love it. I love watching, as I say, women thrive and flourish.
Oh, Samanah, it sounds absolutely fantastic. And thank you so much for your time today to share this with our listeners. Sadly, that's all we've got time for today. A huge thank you out there for joining us to hear Samanah's fantastic story and to champion women this International Women's Day. Make sure you catch the rest of the episodes of the Lightning 50 e-commerce growth hacking podcast wherever you get your podcasts from. And until next time, goodbye.